Hello guys, so in today's video we're gonna be covering why the hip flexors, the PSOAS, is overactive and why that specific muscle group or area on your body is affecting another parts of your body. Other parts of your body. For example, another thing that is happening when the PSOAS is overactive is that normally the QL muscle is also like overactive. They became very tight, and especially on the right side. One of the main reasons why this is happening is because the asymmetries that we have on the body, and that creates certain specific patterns. One of the patterns is that we rely most of our body weight on the right side. And because that's happening, that creates different biomechanical consequences, let's say. So one of the consequences is that it creates more internal rotation on the hip, because think logically, if I'm relying on my body weight on the right side, my hip is going to need to internally rotate, my femur is going to need to internally rotate to absorb the force. And what is going to happen on the other side is that the other leg sometimes is going to be longer. Have you ever heard that, I went to the physio and the physio told me that I have one leg longer than the other? Sometimes it's true that it could be like a structural difference between sides in terms of the bone. Maybe the bone is larger than the other. But most of the times it's because of biomechanical compensation. Because if my body weight is on the right side, I need to reach the left side to be standing up. I need to reach the left side to walk, because I'm not going to be walking with the leg on the air. So because of that and many other reasons, the right hip flexors, the right psoas, become overactive, and that's inhibiting the right glutes. So it's a cascade of problems and a cascade of consequences that the right hip flexor is becoming tight. That's inhibiting the antagonist muscle, which is the right glutes, and that's inhibiting, that's creating tightness on the right hip flexor, on the right QL. That's inhibiting a little bit as well the left obliques, the internal obliques, and that's becoming as well, that's making the adductor, the right adductor, to be tight. You're going to understand this very easily on this tensegrity model, because this is from plane of view. Okay, you're gonna see from in front. When we walk, we're doing this, right? So if we see from the side, that's how we walk. We walk like that. If this is representing your hip flexor, okay, that's what is happening. All right. So the hip flexor is too tight, it's overactive, so it's making this happen. If we see this tensegrity model and we look at this area, okay, this is the QL, so that's gonna be overactive as well. On the other hand here, if this is representing the glutes, okay, the glutes are becoming weak. If the glutes is able to do this, eventually what is going to happen here is that when the glute is contracting, zoop, the hip flexor is going to be released. And one of the things you can understand this very easily is like, because we have that pattern, you have standing up problems. What does that mean? So it means that if you do these two tests that I'm going to show you, you're going to understand that when we stand up on the right side, it's very likely, so if I'm standing up in this position, it's very likely that you have less stability, you have less balance on the right side than if you go to the left side. Because in order to be standing up and supporting your whole body, the right glute needs to be functioning. And this is a test that you can do very often. Just tell someone to go up like that, and you will start seeing that people normally go like that, or people normally shift like that, compensating. Because if you posture your tail and the glute is supporting you properly, That's what is going to inhibit the overactive hip flexor. However, there is another test that is much more effective and efficient, and you're going to do it right now with me. The only thing you need is a foam roller. It's ideally, it should be long, because this is what you're going to do. Don't believe me, try this. Don't believe me, try this. You're going to lay down on your back, and no matter if you're right-handed or left-handed, just try this. You're going to lay down on the foam roller. I almost collapsed. All right, so you're going to lay down on the foam roller. First thing you're going to do is you're going to the posterior tilt. So you're going to touch the lower back on here. And now you're going to raise the right leg up. So now your body is supported with the left side. Body supported with the left side. Now you're going to go with the right side. Just check on myself because I'm already struggling on this side. Okay, so my right side is not bad, but it's a bit more, difficult. Why? One of the reasons is because the muscles that they need to support me when I'm in that position, the right glutes, the left internal obliques, especially, that's what is supporting me there. So that's a very effective exercise to work on activating some specific muscles to inhibit the right hip flexors, which are going to be overactive. Another thing that is going to happen is that if the right hip flexor is overactive, which is very likely, let's imagine that this is representing my vertebrae, okay? One vertebra over other vertebra over other vertebra. When I'm going to the right side, it's very likely that the vertebrae, they start rotating into that direction. And that's gonna make the side of the left side to go a little bit more on the frontal plane of motion. It's gonna laterally tilt. So that's creating different compensations also on the hip. So what is gonna happen is that the right hip is gonna be extended, because one of the consequences of being on hyperextension is overactive hip flexors. But you need to bear in mind that this is not happening symmetrically. You might be like that and it might look, yes, both sides of my hip are hyperextended, my lower back is hyperextended, yes, but it's very likely that what is happening is basically that your right hip is on anterior tilt, and the right side is on posterior tilt, because the hip can move asymmetrically. We have the sacrum in the middle. So the right hip becomes in that direction, externally creating the extension, and the left side of the hip, it goes on posterior tilt. So what that means is that you need to also strengthen the hip flexors, and you need to also activate and engage the hip flexors. So you are not going to inhibit the right hip flexors only by squeezing or activating your glutes. So another strategy that you can do is this exercise in order to start working on the hip flexors. So you're gonna lay down here and you're gonna do posterior tilt. Then once you're here, what you're gonna start doing is flex the ankle, externally rotate a little bit, and you're gonna start rising the leg up. When you're doing this, your goal is to maintain the lower back attached on the floor, because when you start rising the leg, what it could happen is that the hip is moving and it creates that extension or hyperextension on the lower back. Now, I'm gonna tell you something before we move to something more specific like that. It's very often to see that, okay, my right glute is tight, my right glute is weak, and there's one exercise, the clam shells, that people very often do, and I've done that in the past. But this is the movement. When you're doing this movement, you are like that, and then you open in like that. Some people use even like elastic band to have more resistance. So that's creating ABD, abduction, okay, and a little bit of external rotation. All right, that's not going to fix the problem. That can help you to start creating awareness. That can help you to feel the area, but that's not going to fix the problem. Why? Because what I've been explaining you before, the dysfunction that is happening, it's happening in different plane of motions on the right side and on the left side. So by working in an isolated way, you are not going to fix that problem of having your psoas hyper tight in both sides. So one of the strategies that I was showing is the elevation of when I was on the floor, is the elevation of the leg and external rotation, because the hip flexor, the psoas, it does flex the hip, but it does also externally rotate, okay, and create a little bit of ABD. So when you're doing this exercise, you're working on 3 planes of motion, and it's really important that when you're doing that, your right hip is orientated to the left, because we know that the fact of having the right side overactive, we are more on the right side, it's orientating the left hip internally rotated, the right hip is on anterior tilt. So you need to orientate your body into the opposite and then work from that position. So I'm gonna show you one more time. When I'm here, I do posterior tilt, and now I rotate the leg a little bit. When I'm going up, my hip is slightly shifted, it's dropping down to the floor. So I'm thinking on rising with the leg, rising the leg up with external rotation, but I'm also focusing on the posterior tilt on the left side. So in that specific scenario, what I'm doing is, if this is the hip, is I'm rising the leg like that, I'm rotating, and I'm also shifting a little bit. I'm also shifting my hip, this is the left side, to orientate the hip, the right hip towards the left side, and create that posterior tilt on the right side and anterior tilt a little bit on the left side. So that's more integrated than the clam shells, because the clam shells is one exercise that is not gonna fix the problem. It's very isolated. It does not represent the emotion that it's this fun, that is not optimized, and it doesn't represent that real context, because that's, you never walk like that, you never do this, and in a very isolated way. And now the last thing I'm going to show you, it's going to be in the next video for next week. Thank you very much. This is Dave, because this has been long. So this is David El Corbarrutia reminding you to move pain-free and live. Please share the video, click like, and make your comments about your experience with this overactive hip flexor, which is very likely because you work in the whole day seated. So thank you very much. See you in next videos.